the government knew when the airlines were deregulated that every place like Hayes, Kansas, or Garden City, or Dodge, or whatever was going to lose service because it was unprofitable to go on market rates. So they created the Essential Air Service Program. They put it in the Department of Transportation. And so it provides federal monies to assure that those people that had service when the airlines were deregulated continue to have service.
Passenger boardings at the Hayes Regional Airport continue to increase. I'm Becky Kiser, Hayes Post Eagle Radio News reporter, and we're talking airport operations and infrastructure bond issues with Hayes City Manager Toby Dougherty and Vice Mayor Mason Reuter on this episode of the Hayes Post Podcast.
Bonds are one of the ways that cities raise money, and there's different types of bonds. Last night, what we did was general obligation bonds, which is backed by the full faith and credit of the city. So it's probably the most secure bond a person can buy or a bank could buy if they're looking to buy municipal bonds. There's special revenue bonds, there's economic development bonds, there's industrial bonds, there's other types of city bonds. But they typically have a little bit higher interest than general obligation bonds. And so last night, what was issued, you mentioned there was 4 different projects, the Exit 161 infrastructure, the Grove infrastructure, AMI, which is the new water meters and water metering collection system for the data. And that'll actually be paid for out of the water proceeds, but it's still going to be a general obligation bond. And then, get a little deeper into that. The Grove infrastructure will be paid back with RHID revenues. But it will be a general obligation bond. And then we did some temporary notes for the infrastructure at Exit 161. So that'll be a 1-year temporary note. And then at some point, we'll convert that into a bond. So right now, it's just a temporary note that will get us some revenues to be able to pay off the project. It should be out to bid later this fall or later this summer. And then once the full cost of the project, we'll convert that into another bond. And then the big one is the police station. We've issued a couple short-term bonds, which give us some upfront cash for some of the stuff we've been doing for that project. And so this bond will hopefully get us enough cash then to cover the rest of the project.
And Mason, I know that the commissioners have talked over the years about the bonding authority for the city is higher than, and I guess it's somewhat unusual for the city to do this.
Yeah, staff does a really good job of planning ahead and making sure, we're not taking on any unnecessary debt. So, we wait for some of the bonds to roll off before we take on a new one. And as Director Kimrup said last night, we have a AA rating, and the consultant there was telling us how that's one of the highest in the state, and we're proud of that.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about the airport. We had a report from the city's consultant, Toby, about the status of the airport, and we've been hearing good news about record enplanements. And did you go visit with SkyWest?
Yes.
And the airport director recently and got good news there as well.
Yeah, we were out in St. George, Utah 2 weeks ago, I believe it was, meeting with SkyWest executives and reviewing our performance, reviewing the new schedule's performance at Hayes. The new schedule they have in place, it takes a lot more staff time to accommodate. It's just a long day. I mean, when you look at the first flight leaving at 6:35, especially in like winter conditions, we can be getting called for runway checks, 2 hours ahead of that. But the last flight doesn't come in until 11:30 at night. And so it provides a very big window. We have to provide coverage out there. So we were talking about the performance of that. We briefed them on the main runway closure for that 21-day period when the crosswind runway is getting reconstructed. And it's generally had kind of review of our performance since they put the new schedule in place. In short, SkyWest is very happy with our performance at the airport. They're very happy with their performance at the airport. With the new schedule, we see still a lot of upside in it. And as you saw from our air consultant last night, we presented a lot of the granular data on the passengers in the area that have the potential to use our airport and are using our airport. And so I think one of the key takeaways from Gary's presentation last night is we're doing great, but there's still a lot of upside we can capture to increase boardings out there.
What are some of those ways in Mason that we could to capture more? I found that even though it was quite detailed, I found the information really interesting.
Oh, yeah, there's definitely a lot of information that he provided, but it's a lot of good information. And Melissa Dixon and Jamie out at the airport are doing a really good job of telling our story and how people can utilize our airport to get anywhere in the world that they need to go. The report showed us we're connected internationally now to Hayes Regional, so we're very proud of that.
And one of the things that I found interesting was that, and I think people know this, is we still have, I don't know if you'd consider a competition, but there are people who are still driving to Wichita, Kansas City, and Denver. And I know that Hayes for quite some time has talked about, that's a long drive, and that winds up costing you time and money, and you don't have that situation if you fly out of Hayes generally.
Yeah, typically, back in the day, it was kind of the same thing I would probably do too. Back when we had Great Lakes, it was it cost a lot more than to drive down there, and now we're $35 on average difference between Kansas City and Wichita and Denver. We're pretty close to everyone you need to go to. So, and we don't have to pay parking, which is usually $38 a night at those places. So you're saving money by flying right out of there. You don't have to wait in long lines at TSA. You've got your single terminal. There's no running around trying to figure out where you're going. It's all right here. I mean, it's the best of situation.
And Toby, one of the items that was discussed was the growth of the airport, and the commissioners have talked about that. And in fact, our proposed 2026 budget doesn't have a mill levy increase for the airport. Operations are growing, and all signs point to continued growth.
Yeah, we were lucky and received about $4 million in federal money as part of all the COVID response programs. Airports were hit very hard, and so we received a lot of money for the airport. A lot of that was used to subsidize operations. We made some capital investments too, but a lot of it was used to subsidize operations to allow us to figure out what it truly took to accommodate the new schedule, the new regulations out there, just the different regulatory environment we were working in. We knew 6 years ago that we were running deficits at the airport and something needed to change. And we would have had to adjust that mill levy before if it wasn't for the COVID money coming in. So with the 26 budget, we were able to allocate another mill. And again, Mason pointed to this because the debt rolling off and other considerations in the budget, assessed valuation increases, but we were able to allocate an additional mill out there to get the revenues they need to cover that. Now, will that cover that forever? I don't know. If we keep breaking records on employments out there, we're going to have to do a terminal expansion, and we're going to have to probably make some other significant investments in the airport. Right now, we are in a design phase that actually might be out to bid, the parking lot expansion project. Our parking lot's usually pretty full, and we do get people to park in the overflow lot, and that's great in the summertime, but it's in the wintertime or if it's really rainy, you don't want to track that kind of mud into your car. And we are looking at a terminal expansion study next year, which will put some scenarios in place based on aircraft, based on, mandates from the FAA, TSA, things like that on how we may have to improve our terminal, and then it's just a matter of preparing for it and finding the money for it.
Also mentioned briefly was some comparisons, Mason, about the cities in Kansas and across the country that are part of EAS, the Federal Essential Air Service Program. And at one time, I know there was real concern that there was kind of a heads up that, hey, that money may likely be cut in the federal budget and then not coming to the cities. But that has since changed, correct?
Yes, from what we know now, in the initial administration's proposed budget to Congress, there was cuts to the EAS program. But thanks to citizens reaching out, we reached out, and our national delegation, both senators and Representative Mann, been strong supporters of our EAS service. So they were able to fight for that, and as of right now, there's nothing to worry about. Knock on wood.
Wait, Toby, what is EAS exactly? How does that program work with the monies coming back to the cities?
It's a Department of Transportation program. So actually the money doesn't come back to us. The program's administered by the Department of Transportation in D.C. So it's the Essential Air Service Program. It was put in place when the airlines were deregulated back in 78, 79. The airlines used to be regulated, so if you were an airline and you had 3 routes a day between New York and Chicago, there's a limited number of routes, and it was assigned by the FAA. They might make you go to 5 other places that were unprofitable and balance it all out. It was very highly regulated. The government knew when the airlines were deregulated that every place like Hays, Kansas, or Garden City, or Dodge, or whatever was going to lose service because it was unprofitable to go on market rates. So they created the Essential Air Service Program. They put it in the Department of Transportation. And so it provides federal monies to assure that those people that had service when the airlines were deregulated continue to have service. And so, like right now, there's about a $6 million annual subsidy that SkyWest is getting to fly into Hays. And that's not uncommon because they're getting the same subsidy to fly into, Dodge City and Garden City and Liberal and places like that. So it's just, it's very expensive to fly, $40 million jets around and with the crews and the operating and upkeep, it's extremely expensive to fly jets around. So we're very lucky to have the Essential Air Service Program here.
Speaking of those jets, there was some information in the draft budget proposal talking about looking towards the future that the 50-passenger jets that SkyWest uses are no longer being manufactured, and they're looking towards 70-passenger jets. Is that going to affect the city's airport?
It would. So there's lots of different regional jets, or like we fly a CRJ 200, which is a 50-passenger. There's 60 passengers, there's 65 passengers, 70, 75, up to 90. 100-passenger regional jets. When our airport was redesigned back in 2012-13, it was done in anticipation of the 50-passenger jets. Remember, we used to have the 19-passenger beaches. So we designed it for 50 passengers, honestly never dreaming we might have something bigger. But if we do get bigger, it's going to take more. It's going to take another terminal expansion to make it happen. When you get above 50 passengers, up to like a 60-passenger, it also places security requirements on you. Right now, we don't have to have our own in-house security, but if you bring a 60-passenger plane in, we do. So you're probably talking 5 or 6 more employees and all the stuff that comes with that. So there's a lot of federal regulations that come with commercial passenger service. And right now, we're about as cheap as you can get, but every step we move forward higher, which is good for the community, it's good for the passengers, it's good for our economy and flying public, it adds cost to the airport.